Okay, we are live, and I can't believe this, but it's actually been 11 months since we last met online. It was May last year, and I do remember saying, let's do this again soon. And here we are 11 months later. I am so sorry. It just the world just took over from
There's a
me.
lot happening, so I
There is.
completely understand. Well, it's
There
great
is a
because
lot.
it's like meeting you for a drink in the pub. I haven't seen you for ages, Jerry. How are you?
Yeah. Well, God, what a great idea. I should have got a glass of wine before we started.
Oh, I have my tea.
I don't have anything today. I usually have my water jug, but today I haven't bothered.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I've got my water bottle, so I'm all prepared. I'm like that
great.
that perfect Boy Scout.
Mm. Well, we were going to have a surprise guest today. My wife was going to join us, and then she got something that she needs to do with her family, so she's gone off to do that. So it's just you and I. I'm sorry about that, but she promises me next time it will be Anna and Anne together
Well,
next
I
time.
was thinking because we're so rarely seen online that I was thinking, oh,
Yeah,
Jerry, you're going to have two Chinese women on your show.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
thought that would set you ahead of the crowd. So I look forward to meeting Anne, actually the
I'll,
famous
I'll
Anne.
tell you what else would happen as well, because so few people who follow me have ever seen my wife. She's so rarely online. We've done a couple of videos together where we've been cycling or
Mm.
something, and someone's come to record our life. We're quite famous here in China. There's been about, I'd say, more than half a dozen documentaries made about us because we do some strange things, like cycle across China together.
Those are
And
the
she,
ones I've seen. Yeah.
yeah, she actually walked from Zhongshan to Beijing, 2,500 kilometers back in
Mm.
2015, and raised 300,000 RMB for charity. So that got her a little bit of fame. Being married to me didn't make Anne the person she was. She was that person a long time before she met me. Yeah. But anyway, I'm sorry that she's not here tonight. I've got a
Mm.
load of things, but let's start with what's happened to you in the last 11 months, because you've been quite active on Twitter and then you were inactive on Twitter. We lost you.
Oh, yes, that was interesting.
Mm,
Um, I've been deleted. I've been cancelled. No violations. Six
mm,
appeals. Absolutely no response. So my Madam Meow account that I've had since 2008 on Twitter, and I think it was the only continuous, dissenting voice from a Chinese Brit over all that time. So
mm,
it's like there was a lot of stuff that I had documented there. It was also documenting my growing politicization as well over all that time,
mm,
and it was very much being in a vacuum, really, because I would love it if there were loads and loads of diaspora Brits who were questioning the system, but unfortunately that hasn't happened. um, but I think it's, after October the 7th, I think they had a bit of a cull. um, I put up information that I'd gotten from Haaretz and the Times
mm,
of Israel about the
mm,
fact that, and I'd been following what had been going on um, in Gaza, and the fact that Netanyahu was in a lot of trouble.
yeah.
He was on the verge of being prosecuted. You had unprecedented demonstrations against him because he tried this power grab against the judges. And in early 2023, he'd actually appealed to America to go into this mad war against Iran, because I
Mm,
suppose, I assume this is going to keep him out of trouble. It's going to prolong his power there and be a major distraction from the trouble that he's in. And lo and behold, this person who we know now has been funding Hamas in an effort to avoid the two-state solution and to get rid of al-Fatah and to basically hobble the Palestinian Authority. Suddenly you get this this breakout. It seemed And it was just incredible, because we know Egypt told Israel. We know that people who are living around there were saying, well, what's this, what's this noise that's going on? And then it was just left. So I was putting that sort of information out there, and not particularly taking sides, although I have to say, if you've got over 2 million people who've been incarcerated in the Strip, they don't call it the Gaza Strip for nothing. In this tiny, tiny bit of land, at some point, presumably, you're going to get some sort of challenge to that. The hostages, are obviously taking hostages, and any civilian casualties, that I condemn all of that. But the fact that you knew that this was going to happen, well, I didn't know, but we could make an educated guess that this is going to happen. So I was merely putting that information out there. And I think, I can only think because of the timing, then November, it went dark. Suddenly I no longer had my account, and I was getting these messages saying, we want proof of your age. We think this is an underage account, which I thought was hilarious. So I sent ID, 6 times, I think. I sent it and got absolutely nothing back. So as I say, I think they're having a bit of a cull, because I know it's not just me. I think there are a lot of accounts that have gone dark. So it's a bit like a book burning, really. It's not very free speech, though, is it?
No. But I don't think free speech is really what we're looking for here. I've just realized I've got 2 computers going here, and I've just realized that we were on private, so people can watch us because we're on public on YouTube. No one can write a comment. I've just freed that up. So if anyone's looking and saying, "Hey, how I can't write a comment," whoa, there they are. They've all just come up now. There's lots of comments, and
could they hear us?
Sorry. Yeah, everyone can hear. There's 50 viewers as well. So there was comments there, but I couldn't see them because. Hello, everyone. We're here. Yeah, it was so strange, because I got a message from, honestly, I can't remember. So many people were saying, "Have you seen Anna Chen? It looks like her account's gone." And I went looking. Sure enough, it was. And so the next thing, of course, we knew that all we could do was wait for you to come back with Anna Chen Returns, and you are back.
That was actually my backup account. That was originally West Hampstead Wildlife, because it was just charting all the wildlife in the garden, the foxes, lots of foxes in the streets. So that's what that was. It was just a bit of fun. So I basically had to hop over there. I think that started in 2011, but it was already set up. I have actually reclaimed the handle for Madam Meow, and I don't know if anyone has noticed this, but for the past year and a bit, since Elon took over, you can't actually download the data you can't back up your Twitter account. Now, I had done this right up to a year previously, so I've got all the data files for Madam Meow from 2008 to a year before it went down. And I'm just wondering if I could, if I can reinstate that on that account. But of course, it means all the followers that you had have just gone. Yeah. So that's over from 2008, because I was quite involved in politics in Britain. So there that was a whole circuit, a whole area there that's just gone.
Yeah, there's a nice little comment there. Anna looks young.
Oh God, you're so sweet. I love people on Twitter.
and I like this one too, because you moved into your wildlife matters.
Wildlife matters.
Yeah, wildlife. Well, because you went on to the West Hampstead Wildlife.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah,
wildlife's important too.
And now here we are, but I didn't realise that you can. So I've obviously managed to change the names and everything.
So you're back. Anna Chen Returns on Twitter, right?
I'm doing some interesting stuff. I've gone in for the Orwell Prize because I keep forgetting to tell him.
You've been shortlisted and longlisted for that before.
I was, and then they
Mm.
changed the rules and said that
Oh,
no more blogging, that they just wanted published journalists. And so, of course, last year, Asia Times very kindly took me on and gave me the opportunity to get some articles up there.
okay.
And so I thought, right, I'm going in for the Orwell Prize now. So we'll have to see. The deadline was at the end of March,
Hmm.
and I haven't heard back yet. But I'm going. I'll probably put them on a blog, because you have to write a statement, a 1,200 word statement, why you're doing this, and what's behind the pieces that you're writing. So I started off with the Orwell quote, "We have always been at war with East Asia," and sort of took it from there, really.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good start. I want to get into politics with you. Just, I only have one. I've got a few questions here, but only one political question. I wanted to know what you thought about Cameron's appointment. I mean, he was basically unelected and appointed, and then anointed, and then I don't know what you call it when they put the sword. He was he's a member of the House of Lords now,
Yeah.
and then given the job of Foreign Secretary. What do you think of that?
I think this is really interesting because, of course, Cameron was our prime minister at the start of the so-called golden age with China. There was a lot of aggression. In fact, I write about it in my blog. It's there. So before, I think it was 2010, there was a lot of that they were needling China still, and I think Britain's worse because it had the colonialist history with China that America didn't. So there's always been a more snarky thing coming from Britain. But when he went over to China with Osborne, Michael Gove, and Vincent Cable, it all changed. Remember, there was that famous photo of them in front of a picture of the Great Wall, and they're drinking a toast, but they're wearing poppies. And there was a big debate about that. With people saying, "Oh, it's just it's remembrance for the war dead," and
Yes.
people saying, "You're British. You're the government. You're in China, and you're wearing poppies. Do you think maybe it might have another meaning?" Anyway, what amazed me was when he came back. Suddenly, it was like he, Osborne, and Vincent Price had seen the light, and they knew that China was on the up. It was benign. It was going to get us out of a problem, and it was fantastic. I sort of relaxed at that time because I thought, oh, China's on its way. Thank goodness. Phew. That everyone's working together. This is going to be amazing. Then you had Brexit, which nixed that. A lot of American influence in that as well, far right influence. If you think of like Peter Thiel and was it? Oh, Cambridge Analytica. That's right, because they did a lot
Yeah.
of the.
They were involved in Farage, Nigel
Oh
Farage.
no, it was awful. But Farage, before Brexit, if you remember, he was telling us, "Oh, vote
Deal
Brexit, and
with
we'll be able to
China.
get these amazing deals with China, these
Yeah.
amazing trade deals. Look at Iceland. Iceland has got this superb deal. Why can't we have that? Oh, it's because we're shackled by being in the EU." So that was
Yep.
conjured up the minute, obviously, the minute we signed on the dotted line. That was it. He changed. But back to Cameron. What was amazing when they first said, when Rishi Sunak said we're bringing back Cameron to do this, I thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if it's because they realised that beyond all the bombast, the subtext is really, we need China because we can't just be this warring nation anymore. We don't have the economy. We don't have the empire. So I was sort of thinking, well, it's not right because he's in the House of Lords, but maybe they're that desperate that they feel they need to have someone who at least knows the terrain with UK relations with China. So I saw that as a positive thing. But if you remember, he also had that there was this sword of Damocles hanging over his head with Greensill. And I think the way that deep state and the powers that be control everything is they have the carrot and stick. We know, for example, the Epstein Black Book is a very powerful stick, and there are lots of carrots. If you think of how much money various warring heads of state have suddenly got in their bank accounts. So I didn't know what they were using against Cameron, but for him to basically trash his own legacy, I just wonder what was going on behind the scenes, and we can make educated guesses, but who knows?
I've got another little question for you, which has come in from the audience. What does Anna think of little Rishi Sunak? Not the big Rishi Sunak, but the little one.
There's only one little Rishi Sunak, isn't it? You need a microscope to see him.
He's quite small, isn't he? Yeah.
In every sense, though, he is a small man. I mean, he could be 6'5" and he would still be a small man with a big bank account. You know, what's he worth? $1 billion, or certainly with his.
His wife is worth $1 billion. He was worth nearly $1 billion before he became PM. Probably a lot more now.
But all the laws that are being laid down and the groundwork that's being done, this is going to benefit his family. What was there's the company that his wife and father-in-law are
It's an
involved
Indian software company.
Yeah, there's something there. But he's not elected. This is the thing. So, you know, we can have a go at Cameron, but at least at one point he was elected to PM. Rishi Sunak isn't elected into that position. We've had 2 prime ministers. You know, it's like
Infosys.
Sorry?
Infosys.
Ah, right. Yes, that was there's something we should be looking at there, certainly.
Yeah.
But you know, we've had Lettuce Truss, who now seems to be branding herself as the go-to leader of choice when this country goes completely fascist. The stuff she comes out with, it's just, so apart from actually wrecking our economy, you know, she's now going full tilt, because if Trump gets in and his government, his admin, you know, goes on the loose against China the way it looked as if he was going, I think this is one of the reasons he was so furious, because he couldn't complete his project with China. So I think this is very worrying. You know, America, they always pick these leaders, don't they? The equivalent of Tommy Robinson in other countries, and they get bigged up as these are the, you know, the big opponents, that these are the bastions of democracy and free speech, and then you read what they've actually said, and it's like, my
They're actually extremists. You probably have to explain to a few people who Tommy Robinson is. He's pretty extreme, isn't he?
He is extreme. He's right wing. You know, he's young. I suppose he's quite photogenic because he is a young bloke. He's you know, and this is who a lot of people have put much faith in.
Yeah, it's getting worrying. The extreme right seems to be taking over. A lot of Europe is extreme right now. I mean, Holland is the only one with the elected extreme right, but there's quite a lot of rightists, very far right leaders in the European Union now.
The Greens have been a bitter disappointment, because everywhere in Germany, in Britain, they are absolutely behind the whole Uyghur fantasy. You know, you've got what are they? Not the what are they in Brighton? Lord Alton. He's green, isn't he? You know, do you remember that whole Uyghur tribunal?
Yeah. With Jeffrey Nice.
That was that was in fact it was all the case for the prosecution. There was no case for the defense. There was no argument. It was just smack. China bad, China bad, China bad. And in the end, remember that when they finally asked, well, how many people can we prove, you know, are actually incarcerated? And it was under 6,000 people. Well, that's like a prison population.
And that girl, she was quite a pretty young girl, and she was very flummoxed. I remember her going through her papers, and she gave this number, 5,970 or whatever the number was. And they said, well, can you come back with a proper number later so we can have this correct?
Yeah.
This is all the evidence that they have. Now, I can assure you there are people in prison in Xinjiang for separatist activities, for extremist activities. For absolute certainty, there are people in prison for that. And that's probably the number she's got. And it's probably accurate. There are that many people in prison. A lot of them escaped and they went across and they're living in Washington or Syria or Turkey or wherever it is that they're living now.
But Guantanamo, I mean, Guantanamo's still open. You've still got people there. You know,
that was going to be closed by Obama.
Yeah, they just move the goalposts as they see fit. I mean, now I'm really worried because it is like this major assault on 400 years of fact-based Age of Enlightenment thinking. Whereas now you don't have to present any science, any evidence. It's just whatever I say, whatever's in my head, that's what is there. And I blame the postmodernists for this, because the whole postmodernist project from, you know, it got strong, what about maybe since 20 years ago. The whole thing is that you create reality in your head in language, you know, and somebody pointed out, they said about Lyotard, who's one of the postmodern thinkers, philosophers. They said the thing about Lyotard is if you threw him in the sea, he'd still get wet.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, it's I always describe this as allegations are not evidence, and evidence is not proof. And I come from a police background, security industry background. I've got training in criminal law, contract law, all kinds of different legal aspects. And I'm not a lawyer, but I can just look at something and say, well, that's an allegation. You know, where is your evidence? And I get it every day where people make allegations against me working for the CCP. I'm getting paid by the CCP. Gosh, I wish I got, if I had one RMB for every time someone told me I'd been paid, I'd be pretty rich.
But it depends so heavily on character assassination.
Yeah.
And, you know, playing the man, not the ball, I believe is.
That's the way I usually reply back to them, saying, well, look, you know, if you can prove that, I'll give you the last 6 months of the income that you can prove that I've earned. Oh, now we've got a problem because they can't prove that at all. Let's move on. Let's get off the political stuff. And you just wrote a very interesting book review, which I found quite interesting because I honestly didn't know very much about May Wong, and you kind of opened my eyes. I guess I'm too young. That's my excuse. But you kind of opened my eyes about who May Wong was. I mean, I knew she existed. I knew the name, but I didn't know very much more. Tell us a little bit about her and how important, because I kind of see her as an early generation of you.
Well, I call her the mitochondrial Eve of the Chinese diaspora. Okay. She was born in Los Angeles in 1905. Right. So we've just gone past her centenary. She was important because she was Hollywood's first Chinese superstar. She's a screen legend, you know, of silent movies and sound movies. She was beautiful. She was spirited. She was fifth generation, so she spoke like an all-American gal. But of course, what happened is when she wanted to be an actress, because she was born, raised in Los Angeles, and you were seeing the beginnings of the Hollywood industry out there. And I'm afraid that book that I reviewed got this really wrong. You know, she said that, oh, it's because the weather was great and the light was wonderful. Yes, that's all very true. But the reason they all went out there was Thomas Edison was a very, very aggressive litigator when it came to his patents, and he patented everything, including all these cameras and lighting and so on. So you had a lot of the chancers who were starting to make it in the movie industry on the East Coast. Luckily, they had the Transcontinental Railroad, which had been built largely by Chinese labor, coincidentally. So they go off to the West Coast and get as far away from the law on the East Coast as possible, and they start up Hollywood. So she's growing up there, and she sees all these film sets, and she's just absorbed. I mean, I remember when I was a kid going to school, and there was a film set on Liverpool Street. My school was Central Foundation in Spitalfields. So I remember going through the station, seeing all these cameras, and there was Yul Brynner making some movie. I can't remember what the movie was called, but it was like, wow, that's Yul Brynner. And I was so fascinated, and I was just staring. I wanted to talk to him, but they kept us away. No, Mr. Brynner is learning his lines. So I understand that excitement. So she's surrounded by it. She wants to get into movies. From a very early age, she's managing to get bit parts. And then at 17, she lands the starring role in The Toll of the Sea. And this is an important movie because it uses the old two-strip method, which is red and green, no yellow, strangely enough. And so it's a very, very early Technicolor or duo color. But she plays the starring role, which is this sort of Madame Butterfly tragic character. She falls in love with this shipwrecked American sailor. They marry. He promises her, I've got to go home, but I'll come back when the cuckoo's nest. And of course, what we know is that cuckoos don't nest. They actually have their eggs in other birds' nests. So she's left there pregnant. She has the baby. And there's there's such a funny photo of the still. Well, it's the still of her and the baby. And you've got this complete blue-eyed blonde kid with curly hair, and she's supposed to be the mother. Anyway, he returns with his wife, the blonde white wife. They say, we're going to take this kid. We're going to adopt the kid because we're going to give it a better life. We're going to take it to America. Anna May Wong, very tragically, commits suicide, and it's the first of many deaths. And I wrote this a theatre piece after called Anna May Wong Must Die, because the punishment, there are all these anti-miscegenation laws, and of course, you know, by the time she's in the movies, that there's a lot of prejudice against Chinese people. And we know there was in 1882 there was the Exclusion Act, which was very viciously specifically against Chinese. And she herself, even though when she became a famous movie star, when she went abroad, she had to fill in this notorious form 403 to get back in the country. So that was pretty awful. But later on, another thing that I loved about her, there's so many things about her that I loved, is that the contradictions of being in that situation and running up against the racism, plus in the 30s when Japan invaded China, she became politicized. She started to look into this, you know, where am I, who am I, you know, all this stuff is like a dagger in my heart. And she ended up raising funds for the China cause. So she wasn't just some airhead, some beautiful airhead, you know, she was very driven, she was principled. And it's just tragic that she died at the age of 56, just as she was about to make a comeback in the Flower Drum song, the Hollywood musical.
But she was passed over for the Pearl Buck, the Good Earth, wasn't she?
Oh, right. Yes. Pearl S. Buck had written this blockbuster. It was a Pulitzer Prize winning blockbuster called The Good Earth. And it was about Chinese farmers in China. So, of course, you'd think logically by this time, it was 1937, she's already hugely famous, the most famous Chinese woman in the world, apart from Madame Chiang Kai-shek. And so she lobbies hard. She wants this part. But as soon as Paul Mooney is cast in the role of the husband, because of these miscegenation laws, you can't have an interracial kiss. In fact, the first interracial kiss between Anna May and a white actor is in 1928 in a British-made movie, German director, called Piccadilly, that was set and made in London. In America, you couldn't do that. So, of course, how logical. They give the role to I think she was Swedish actress, Louise Reiner. Or is she German? She's German or Swedish. She ends up, you know, this is the great insult. She gets the Oscar for the role.
Right. Yeah. What a sad state of affairs. I mean, there's a Chinese actress playing it Why couldn't they found a Chinese actor to play the part of a Chinese farmer? It
Because they needed
seems very strange.
they needed the Western movie star, didn't they? And
Yeah.
it's and a lot of this, of course, continues right up to modern times as well. I mean, in Britain, you know, you hardly ever see Chinese faces. America's a bit better, actually. I think because they, I don't know, they had Formosa, Taiwan. Britain had Hong Kong. So I don't know why in Britain they've been so resistant to having Chinese faces, unless it's Bert Kwok, you know, unless it's sort of comedic, and degraded, of course. So I grew up with the only Chinese women as my, well, they weren't role models. You know, you had Juicy Lucy and Susie Wong, who were two hookers, and that was it. So everything was degraded. The one character that I did like was the evil daughter of Fu Manchu, and the reason I quite liked Sai Chin in all those Hammer horror Fu Manchu movies was because at least she had a bit of power. She could do, you know, she could do something. I mean, she was bad, she was evil, but she wasn't just this simpering girl child, you know, girl woman.
Right, because she was so evil, she was good. So PB Wells just put something up here, which I remember. Americans did have a hissy fit when Uhura and Captain Kirk had a kiss.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's 1970s, 90s, 50 years afterwards, and they're still having a hissy fit about it.
Yeah.
Gosh.
They can be quite strange in that way. I mean, there's so much of this is deeply embedded. I mean, remember that Sax Roma wrote all those Fu Manchu books that were vilifying the Chinese and, of course, reversing the whole Opium War situation.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, if you think is the British who inflicted mass-produced opium grown with, you know, industrial methods that they forced onto China, whereas before it was only aristocrats. You had to be very wealthy to be able to afford the Dutch-grown opium.
Let's talk about the Opium War for a minute, because you and I have completely independently come out. I just, about 3 months ago, I wrote an article about Dongguan. I have a contract to write an article a month, one article a month, for a Chinese travel magazine about a city that I've visited. It's really fun to do. It's hard work, but it's fun. You know, a city that I visited, and one of them I wrote about Dongguan and talked about this, the destruction of the opium. And it wasn't until quite recently that I discovered that they didn't set fire to the opium. But you discovered this years ago, and I've looked at some of your stuff, and I wasn't using you as a source, but I found out that you and I have the same kind of view on this. This was lime and seawater, or lime and salt water, that was used instead of. Can you imagine the tons of opium burning in Dongguan? Everybody would be down there for a sniff if that were the case.
Well, I've been pointing this out since 2010. You know, I reviewed Niall Ferguson. He made the same mistake. He said that it was burning, and I'm just trying to find, because I've just posted on my YouTube, on my Madame Meow YouTube, the song in 2012. I took the steampunk opium wars to the belly of the beast, you know, the Royal National Maritime Museum.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah. Of the British Navy, and I was trying to get people to understand that this was the situation. So it's there anyway. That I've put out extracts up on my website and at YouTube, but there's this really good refrain. I mean, I thought it was a real hoot, actually. So I want to just.
If you send me the link to that, I'll post it in the description.
and there's the refrain. The refrain. Right.
Is this you singing?
Yeah, we're all of us on stage. I'll give. Where's the best place to drop this in?
Just post, send the
DMs.
link to me.
Oh, all right,
Yeah,
I'll put that in DMs.
Yeah, you can do it, and I'll just put it into the description of the video. That's very, very easy to do.
It's called Lindsay Zhu, Just Say No.
Okay. Lindsay Zhu. Niall Ferguson, the professor who lied about flights leaving Wuhan at the height of the pandemic. So he's been caught before. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, he got that wrong. But also, there's this book by Julia Lovell called The Opium War. And it's like, oh my God, all the academics, you know, thought it was wonderful. The British Museum had it as their centerpiece at the Chinese exhibition they had a few months ago. And she says the same thing. It's, you know, that it was burnt. So in 2012, I wrote the review of that as well. So I might find that for you. But she,
yeah, I actually had, and I linked it. There is a Chinese document which explains what did happen and how it was destroyed. They couldn't have burnt it. If they'd burnt it, it just wouldn't have. I mean, it would have just been a fantastic evening out for the locals in Dongguan.
For obvious reasons, they didn't burn it. So I've been like hammering away at that since 2010, and I was quite shocked actually to see just a few years ago that people on Twitter were still assuming that the Opium Wars were fought to stop the Chinese growing opium, that the British went over there to stop and it's like, this is just crazy. And when we did the show at the Royal National Maritime Museum, the audience, I asked the audience, you know, who'd known about this. Nobody knew. There were about 2 people in the audience who'd heard about this, and out of all my friends, the only person who was taught this at school was someone who went to a private school. If you went to a state school, they didn't cover this at all. So I'm glad now that people have clocked this, have discovered this. I feel like my work is done. Well, actually, it's not done. It's still carrying on.
You're going to like this comment. Who's the lady guest with the posh British accent? Would you describe yourself as posh?
No, I'm London born.
Yeah.
Is it posh? I don't know. I think you can hear my lazy Hackney vowels in there.
Yeah.
But
I would describe you as an East Ender, more Cockney than posh, but I like it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to speak and be understood and heard, sometimes you have to sound your consonants. You have to get your vowels right. Oh, my vowels are in an uproar, and you know, just for communication. And I like to do my poetry, recite and perform poetry.
I was going to say, you've done quite a lot of poetry readings and public speaking, so I guess there's something in that. You must have had to soften the hard parts of a Hackney accent.
Yeah, and
actually, my first wife was born in Hackney, you know.
Oh, you have good taste.
True story. Yeah.
You know,
but she was an Australian.
Australian. Oh wow! But
her parents were those £10 tourists.
But what really, you know, put me off? There's a middle class Mockney accent that I really, really despise, and you hear it. Tony Blair started off, instead of saying "to," it's "tuh," and it's like, you know, it's people trying to get authenticity, that they're somehow real by mocking, I think, a working class accent. You know, working class people like to be understood, so you get a range of, you know, from broadest Cockney to I suppose it's called received, isn't it? Received pronunciation. But I'm always suspicious of politicians who try and put on this Mocknified accent. It tells you a lot about them, their insecurities, their pretensions. think you know what they're trying to communicate, who they are, which probably most likely has nothing to do with who they are. So
Yeah.
I'm posh. I'm just
You do sound a little posh sometimes. I think that's the poetry reading coming out in you. I was actually born a Geordie, or a Mackem, in fact. I was born in Sunderland in the northeast of England. So I do occasionally slip up and throw in something like a
So when
Bath
was
or a...
Essex? When did
Sorry?
you when did you move to Essex then?
I was 13 when I was in boarding school in Durham, and they're a bit posh for Northerners. And my father got a job. My father was a master mariner, and he came home from the sea and got a job in BP House in your area, Liverpool Street, just outside of Liverpool Street Station, Moorgate, I think. He was in BP
Moorgate.
House there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Oh,
because of that, the family moved to Essex, and so from the age of 13 onwards, I was in school in Essex, which made me quite a kind of unique character. The boys would beat me up, or try to, and the girls loved me. They would, oh, say something in your funny accent. So I don't know. I don't know what you mean. Like, what are you talking about?
No, I do love it. I think there are some accents that I just don't like. I think they're like South African is not the most.
Yes.
But no, I love Geordie accent. Say it again. Go on. I like
I don't know what you're talking about.
it.
No, I mean, I lost it. I quite deliberately lost it. It caused me a lot of trouble when I was 13, 14, 15, going to comprehensive schools in Essex. I was in school in Chelmsford for a year or two, and then in Wickford in Essex. And you can't go around there with the Geordie accent and not get your head kicked in from time to time. So I just kind of, I mimicked the people around me. Then I moved to Australia and I became an Australian, and then I came to China, and this is what I've adopted or adapted. I'm not sure, but certainly this is how I feel now.
So what is your Chinese accent like?
我不知道，我不会说中文，真的我不骗你。And 唔識講白話，識聽少少。So I can basically get by with Chinese, and people say that I'm standard. And my Cantonese, what little I use in Cantonese, is what they call Seikehua. I live in a place called Sichi, or Seike in Cantonese, in Zhongshan, and my Cantonese accent is apparently quite standard for this area. And my Mandarin, the people who listen to me, they're probably being polite and kind. So many people think I don't speak Chinese, but you can't live here this long and not have. And you can't travel the way I've traveled. Riding a bike across China with another foreign friend. You have to have some. You've got to be able to order food, get directions, and things like that.
So how long have you been in China?
19 years. I'm 19 and a half years. I came here in October 2004. So yeah, we're getting close to that dreaded 20-year, 2-decade. But yeah. So well, I'm going to put this one up. I should take a screenshot of this. Thank you, FU. I think Anna's face is better than Jerry's Chinese.
Than what?
That's true. Yeah, better than what? It's not as good as my wife's. Her English. There are two myths about my wife and I. One is that I decided to stay in China because I met Anne, and the other is that Anne's English is so good because she's married to me. Neither are true. When I met her, her English was as good as it is today. And I only met her because I decided to stay, and I went looking for a job, and she was the manager at the language center where I became a teacher. So she was my boss for a little while. And okay, this is a fair question. Can you read and write? 不会. I can read probably about 100, maybe 200 characters, but I struggle with things like newspapers and things like that. No. Somebody else says, I've heard Jerry speaking Chinese. Mandarin is pretty good. I don't know when you've heard that, but it's I call my Chinese ability taxi. I can speak taxi Chinese. I get into a taxi and you've got a 20-minute drive to the other side of town. And the driver says, where'd you come from? What do you do? How long have you been here? You're married? You got a girlfriend? You got children? All these questions. And, we have a good conversation about that. And then when I get out, he says, oh, Lehigh, very, very good. Yeah, okay. I just answered questions. That's all I do. But they think I can speak it. So I'm pretty happy.
I had menu Chinese when I was in China. I sort of picked up a little enough to order my food in Chinese, and that was it. And I do regret not paying more attention to my dad's, well, to my dad full stop, but his calligraphy was absolutely beautiful,
Oh, right. Yeah.
So
My wife does wonderful calligraphy too. She's very good at that stuff, and she's just her culture and everything like that is so much more intense than everything we have in the West. Let's move on to talk about Susie Wong and the human cannonball. Now, I've been asked.
It's Susie Wong, human cannon.
Oh, cannon. Sorry, the human. Actually, I wrote human cannon. The word cannonball came up. Sorry. I've been asked to ask you, did you really fire yourself from a cannon?
Metaphorically speaking,
right.
I was the cannon, because the whole point was to turn yourself from a soft target into a weapon, because I was so fed up with, you're growing up, the pressure is constantly on you to be submissive, to be a certain way, to be this giggling, high-pitched man pleaser. I can't stand it when I see that. I just think, have some pride, just be you. So that's what that was about. In fact, I've got a I don't know if you can see.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's,
is that a DVD?
That's that's the flyer that was.
Okay. Yeah, I'm still here. Can you hear me, Anna?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we lost you for a moment there. Yeah, the flyer. Okay. So.
So that was a lot of fun. I took it to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. No one had done anything like this before, but I was just so driven. I was just so fed up. It was a way of me just venting, getting it out of my system, but in an artistic way. And it was quite funny because at one point, so I presented the stereotypes of Chinese women, and the idea was that one by one you just overturn them, and you really taking a hammer to them. And at one point, it was sort of intimated that I might put out ping pong balls, because this was a really ugly image of Chinese. In fact, the same year that while I was actually there performing this show, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert was premiering in Britain at the Edinburgh Film Festival. These festivals go on in at the same time, and I was horrified to see that the key villainess was an Asian bride, a mail order bride who puts out ping pong balls and who really enjoys it, and everyone else is outraged and she's a horrible person. And I thought, so I'm trying to undo this with the show that I'm taking up, and here they are, really trashing Asian women, which I thought was really awful. So there was this hint. So when it got to the point, the climax of the show, the coup de théâtre, I pulled out a blow up sex doll which we'd filled with K-pop, so it was quite solid. We'd found we'd sourced a ping pong ball gun multis that held about, I don't know, 12, 15 ping pong balls. So we had the muzzle coming out of the business end of out of the doll, and it was great because in the front row you'd get all these young blokes with their six packs, thinking they were going to some sort of sex show, and I just mowed them all down with the ping pong balls. That was fun. That made me.
Bet. Are you the first person ever to take a sex doll onto a British stage?
Not only that, I'm certainly the first Chinese writer performer to take a show to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival,
Mm.
and I'm really pleased that it was something that was disruptive, and it made people think, about the stereotypes that they're being fed about other human beings. And it did get a lot of attention. And
It did or it didn't?
It did.
I thought it might. I thought for a moment you said it didn't. I thought, what? It was. I saw write-ups in your blog. You've got The Guardian and a few other things there. That it was well written up.
Yeah, I was on TV, talking about it. I think because people had never seen anything like this before, and it's like, well, this is one permutation of what Chinese people are. We're not all the Fu Manchu stereotypes straight out of Sax Roma.
Yeah, I saw. I'm just going back through. This is what I saw, and this is something I agree with. Chinese women are if they are submissive, I married the wrong one.
We're not.
I have not. Well, I have not met a single one like that. It is a huge misconception. This kind of the giggling girl. Yeah, you do get them, but they're usually kids at school. They're not.
Oh, women. No, you do get man pleaser women doing that, and I'm just saying, sisters, please stop.
Maybe I just hang around in the wrong circles because I've never seen man pleaser women doing that. Hang on a second, someone's calling me, and I'll just flick that off. I'll explain to him later what I was doing.
We're on air.
I'm live. Don't you know? I haven't got the light bulb on. I've actually got, this is my little studio here, and you can see I've got things behind me to make it look like a studio, but I haven't got the little flick switch. If the door's closed, I'm live. If the door's open, I'm not. That's the rule. It's like sharing an apartment with another guy. If the door's closed, don't come knocking. That sort of thing.
Oh, that's a good idea. Although yes. I like it, you see, when my loved one comes and brings me cups of tea, that's allowed.
Well, that was another question that I saw come up here, and I wasn't sure whether to ask you or not. The question was, is Anna married with children? And I'll be honest, I don't know the answer to that.
I'm a woman of mystery. No,
yes, you are.
I would have liked kids. I wish I had kids. And no, I'm not married, but loved one long time.
Good. Yeah. Okay, next question. Let's move on from there. What's going on in the USA? You tweeted about the religious overtones of the way the US is running its foreign policy. What's going on?
Oh, that's scary. I mean, I am reminded of the Amiga Man. I think everybody ought to go and track down Amiga Man, made in 1971, starring Charlton Heston. And it's just what we're seeing today, the way you get the religious demagogues taking over the media, getting huge followings, completely abandoning Enlightenment values, science. Mm-hmm. And then there's a pandemic. Oh, where have we seen this lately? So all these things are being used, and it's that collision of church and state, which in Britain, thank goodness, we've largely been able to keep at arm's length, even though we have bishops in the House of Lords, of course.
42 of them.
But nothing like America. I mean, that language that's used in that video that I posted, that's scary. Oh, the Bible. So you want God to punish us because we're not obeying the Bible? And this was somebody, what was that, Congress? He's saying
it was a congressman talking to the head of a university where we're supposed to have debating values. How can you debate something if God tells you that everything else that's not what I say is wrong?
And of course, they're trying to close it down. They're threatening to send in the National Guard. And the last time they sent the National Guard into Ohio, Kent University,
Kent State. Well, they killed 4 people and injured 20 something. And do you know that a week or 10 days later they did the same thing at a black university, but it never made the press.
Oh, I forgot.
And
That's bad.
even more people died at a black university just a very short time later, like a week, 10 days later. There's a question here. And I know the answer to this, is Anna a journalist?
I didn't get journalistic training, but I have
Mm-hmm.
written journalism for the Guardian. You know, I've made programs for the BBC, basically by putting in a lot of hard work and studying. I mean, Orwell. I at one point I think I'd read the whole of the Orwell canon. That guy wrote a lot. But he was very important to me because in 1998 I wrote a long piece reviewing Orwell. I've changed some of my views since then, but basically it stands. I have friends who teach journalism at uni, and they're just so depressed about the whole state of affairs. He said, you know, we're teaching kids something, you know, where there are no jobs anymore. And you look at the writing that there is, it's absolutely appalling. You know, I'd been writing for The Guardian, and the last thing that they published of mine, I actually included a warning about what was coming down the pike at us. I'll find that. I think that was when was that? 2018, but it was after Trump, just as Trump had come in. So seeing all the attacks on China, you know, I was thinking, oh, maybe, you know, that they'll let me write stuff that's putting up the counter argument. But they weren't even letting people like Martin Jakes write. And he's been, wow, you know, he's an academic. He's been around for years and years. They won't even let him write. So I wanted to put up the argument, and this is why I was doing a lot on Twitter and on my blog. And they just had this one, they got hold of this one Chinese woman who was just like, every time there was anything positive from China, she'd always find the negative spin. Like if China was doing stuff with PPE, you know, donating PPE, providing it, and the vaccinations, it's because it's just PR for them, you know, while the West were doing absolutely nothing. So that there are all these cases where it was just, let me at least put the argument up, at least argue it in your pages, but they wouldn't. And of course she ended up being kicked upstairs to the Washington Post, which, as we know, is also called the Pentagon newsletter. So that's the state of journalism. Do you remember Paul Keating when he took on those the mainstream journalists? He gave that wonderful speech, and then they all sort of lined up one by one, thinking, you know, we're going to take down the old, you know, the old guard. And he just by using logic and truth,
he killed them. Yeah. I love Paul Keating. I have to admit, when I was in Australia and he was the Treasury, what they call the Chancellor of Treasury man, he was the head of the finance. He was also Prime Minister. I didn't like him very much. I like him a lot now.
He was quite right wing, though. I think that's why. But it's amazing, isn't it? People like him have stood still, and it's like everything has moved to the right around
That's
them.
probably true. Yeah, that's probably true. I have my own experience with The Guardian. And I'll tell you a little story about my experience with The Guardian. In 2000, I traveled overseas in the early part of the year and came back to China into quarantine. And I was one of the very first people to come into quarantine. Strangely enough.
You mean 2020?
Yeah, 2020. Yeah, it was about March, early March 2020. China was still letting people in. I went into 2 weeks of quarantine, and the guy who just tried to call me there, that guy, I met him at the airport, and we went into quarantine together in different places. So that's a coincidence. But while I was in quarantine, a local newspaper group here in Guangdong asked me to write about my experience of coming through into the quarantine so that they could publish it so everyone knew. Because, I mean, I wasn't writing at the time, and I knew these people through my bike riding, and they asked me if I would mind writing an article. It was the first article I'd ever been asked to write. So I wrote this article about coming through, and it got picked up. I was contacted by The Guardian in the UK and asked a load of questions, and I responded to the questions, and they were coming to me on a daily basis. Oh, it's tea time.
Thank you.
They were coming to me on a daily basis to ask for updates on what was happening, and I was just telling them what was happening inside of Zhongshan in my quarantine, and how my life was going at the time. It was pretty boring stuff because I couldn't leave the apartment. Then I got out of my apartment, and we had a few things going on, and then there was a case in Zhongshan of COVID, and they mass tested 4 million people in 24 hours.
No, it's amazing.
And I know, it's amazing. I contacted The Guardian and said, look, I've got this wonderful story about what they did here. I got no reply. So I sent another message. I got no reply. So I sent a message to the second person, copy the first person. I had these two contacts in The Guardian who were talking to me every day when I was in lockdown, and I had a negative story to tell them. It wasn't a negative experience, but it was a negative story. And then as soon as I had a positive story, I never, to this day, I've never received another email from The Guardian. Wow.
Oh, you won't? No. It's the biggest lockdown has been the information lockdown.
Yeah, it's true. I want to put this question up, which came in a little while ago from PB World. Anna said she'd received more racism from the left. Could you expand on that?
This was a really painful episode. I bet that the SWP in particular had spent 18 months on my doorstep trying to recruit me, and at last I thought, oh right, okay, I ought to be doing something progressive. It's just from the start. I mean, maybe I ought to. I've written about it. I've written a long piece about it. But you go in trying to do what it says on the tin, and you get this strange hostility. I mean, there's one of their journalists who said he'd never met me, never talked to me, who just declared, I hate you, I can't stand you. It's like, well, talk to me then. I don't know who you are. He would never explain, but there was this whole aggression and antagonism. I think it's, as above, so below. It's like we're in a big Mandelbrot set. And you see when China does something better than the West, it's like, you're not allowed to do that. And you see all the aggression, and it happens at the macro and it happens at the micro as well. And I think that's a lot of what it wasn't the whole picture, but that's a lot of what it was. So, for example, when it came to 2001 was such a busy year, because at the beginning of 2001 you had the Blair government, or an outpost of the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food, blaming the UK Chinese for foot and mouth. So I did press on that. That was really good, because there are a few people, we came together and we realized we've got to fight this because they're building a pogrom against us. So we did that. Ended up, the whole of Chinatown came out on strike one Sunday, and we marched to MAF, and I'd been in the negotiating team as well, talking to Nick Brown, who was the minister. So he came out on the day, he vindicated us in front of the world's cameras and said, no, this isn't true. I am not a racist. And so that was sorted. Then there was the election where I did the press for the Socialist Alliance, because we could see the Blair government going very right wing. We thought there was a danger that people instead were going to be seduced by the far right unless we put up an alternative and say, look, there is a way you can be progressive and for Labour with not the Labour Party, but Labour as opposed to capital. There was that. And then, of course, September the 11th, you've got the 9/11, and I found myself positioned, well, to do the press for that, for Stop the War, which had been moribund, which hadn't done anything, and to stop them turning it into another walk around the park, which is what the left do. You know, you get a lot of fuss and then suddenly it just all goes, and then nothing more, no coordination. So I did the press for the that, what culminated in that huge march in 2003, in February 2003. And also, it's quite funny because John McDonnell was supposed to be the leader of the left, and you know, he was the de facto leader of the left, but he had a break, and they brought in his mate Jeremy Corbyn, who was a backbench MP who'd been around for 20 years, always turned up like for the South Africa demonstrations and that, but he was sort of filling in. And John McDonnell eventually called it, oh, it's Buggins's turn. That's what it was meant to be. But I was doing all the press on this, and it just happened, you know, this weird, not conflation, this just all these events happening. So Corbyn ended up being the figurehead of Stop the War. You know, very good, going to speaking all over the country, you know, appearing on platforms and that. So that's where that happened. But the aggression I got, the hostility I got from the left for having the temerity to do what they hadn't been able to do themselves, was just, it just absolutely shocked me. And I realized it's all a turf war. It doesn't matter what we're facing. It's their own standing, their ego, you know, that is more important than linking arms and actually joining forces.
Yeah, I'm seeing the same thing in America as well. I've done a series of interviews with MAGA communists, and they're going through the same thing. They've got the left, and then they've got the people who want socialism, and they're not necessarily the same people.
No, and Yanis Varoufakis has just said, because, you know, they closed down the Palestine conference in Berlin. You know, I didn't realize, but he said there are people who were previously, who he regarded as comrades, who were supporting the shutdown of this conference on really spurious grounds as well. So it's like under pressure, everyone's masks come off, and you see who you're really dealing with.
Right. This question came in from Jay just a little while ago while you were talking. Has Anna thought about joining the Workers' Party? George Galloway's now in Parliament. I think they're going to field about 300 members, 300 candidates for the next election. Have you thought about it?
This is an interesting case. When George, in about 2019, 2020, came on the scene regarding China, he befriended me. And he was very sweet to me. He was very warm. We had lots of, you know, DM exchanges. He didn't know who people were, so I was like orientating him around the people who were emerging in the in the pro-China camp, or at least who were challenging the anti-China narratives. And I got Mario Cavolo on there. I recommended Daniel Dumbrell and a few others. He just, I'm afraid he's turned on me. I don't know why. I don't know what he's done. He refused to talk to me. I ended up getting a couple of pylons from his followers that he'd started. So I don't know what the situation is, but obviously, given the hostility from George Galloway and his refusal to even acknowledge that I'm around now, and the cancellation that's gone on, I think it's quite unlikely that I'm going to do anything with the Workers' Party.
Yeah, that's strange. I was invited onto his show quite early in my political career. You know, bear in mind that 4 years ago, I had none of this and no thought of going down this track either. I never expected to be doing what I'm doing in my retirement. And then out of the blue, more than 2 years ago, I get a call from Moats, mother of all talk shows, saying, would you be willing to come on the show? So, yeah, of course. You know, this is George Galloway. Now, I remember George Galloway from my police days in the campaigns for nuclear disarmament and things like that, when I was on the other side of the fence. And, I can remember what a pain in the butt he was. And we talked about that very briefly because my background and his background, we met each other. I never arrested him or kicked him or anything like that, but I was in the same protests that he was at. And so we had a good chat, but he was really only interested in my bike ride across China. He wasn't interested in the political aspects or anything like that. So it was quite interesting. I would guess that was probably the biggest moment of my certainly my early online experiences was getting invited onto that show. I thought maybe since you recommended Mario Cavolo and Daniel Dumbrell, all people I've met now, actually, maybe you put my name forward too.
Yeah, I can't remember. I remember those particularly, especially, Mario going on there. And of course, we know that Daniel Dumbrell blocked me. So there's this really weird...
That was. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you the circumstances. And that was, I mean, again, when Daniel came up, I was tweeting his stuff everywhere, especially on Hong Kong. He had some really, very upsetting videos of women, Chinese women who are being beaten up by umbrella-wielding thugs. So, it was like, to me, when you lot turned up, it was like the cavalry arriving. And it was very important to make sure that there was, mutual support. So that was fine. And I got this DM from him saying, oh, the Chinese media aren't handling the PR at all well. And I was, saying, yeah, absolutely. And having actually done PR quite successfully myself for left causes, I thought it would be good to have to talk. And then suddenly he went quiet. There's absolutely nothing. Again, no explanation. It's like you're just cancelled. And then he was having a go at Gordon Chang, who, of course, the Gordons and the Vickies. I mean, it's just awful that these people feel compelled to say the stuff they do. It's such a lack of dignity. I feel embarrassed for them. So he was having a go at Gordon, and it looked like the discussion. Well, it wasn't even a discussion. It was going on to, why are all these, Chinese who are who are in the West, they behave like this. And I said, well, actually, I've got very similar situation. I'm in a very similar situation to Gordon Chang. We both had Chinese father and a Western white mother. And I said, and I'm not like that, expecting to have a debate and actually try and look deeper into what it is that compels some Chinese people to behave in this way. And then suddenly he just, like a lot of others, he just blocked me. So I don't know what that is about. You can't have the debate. You don't know what it's about. I think there's a lot of sexism. There are a lot of very negative character traits that are emerging in this.
That's interesting. I might talk to Daniel about that and see if he can shed some light on it and contact you directly. The reason, I mean, I know Daniel well. I know
he refused. He refused. I tried. I've asked him. I asked him on DMs, and there was nothing. And this is what they do: they just slam the door, act like gatekeepers, won't discuss it. Like because you're in the same movement. You have the same objectives. You have the same aims. Why would you do that? It's just it's just bizarre. So as you know, none of them will talk to me. You're the only one who will, who
I love talking to you.
And Steve Weaver's lovely, but he was on someone's podcast and he suggested to them, he said, oh, why don't you speak to Anna Chen? And his comment got a like from this person, but nothing else, no follow through. I can't imagine why they don't want to have me on, Jerry. Can you?
No, honestly I can't. I mean, I'm not being sarcastic there. I really can't. I can talk to people like Daniel Dumbrell. Another great one is Jason Smith. Steve Weaver I've met as well. Steve came to Guangdong.
Steve.
Yeah, he's a lovely. He's exactly the same in real life. A lovely man. And I met him in Dongguan last year. I was there with Fernando Munoz Bernal. We were attending a function together, not related to anything political. It was the anniversary of his favorite restaurant in Dongguan, and he invited me to join him. So we went there, and it happened to be that Steve was in the area, and he caught up with us, spent the night at the hotel that we were at, and met Anne and I, and we had breakfast together and dinner together, and then he headed back to Guangzhou, where his wife was. So someone says, who is Steve? Steve Weaver. He is Steve Weaver Teffel, I think is his TEFL on Twitter or X now. Very, very nice guy. Very nice guy. But there's a couple of others. Have you seen Jason Smith? Jason Smith is always putting stuff out about what China is doing in the global south. You have a big smile now. You know him.
Jason is the one that Steve actually suggested, why don't you have Anna on?
Okay, right. Well, I've been on Jason's show a couple of times, and I've met him and his wife, lovely people. So I'll give Jason a call later.
But it's basically a guys' club, which is absolutely wrong. You know, it feels like the new colonialism, I'm afraid.
There's a couple of ladies getting in here. There's a Chinese. Chinese is really good. I think she's in Shanghai and speaks Chinese, living in Shanghai and having a great time and posting a lot.
No, I've tweeted her and commented on her Twitter. Now ask me if it was reciprocal.
No, obviously it wasn't. I wonder what it is.
Because you can't look. I think a lot of people are in a position. They seem to have this self-image of white savior or non-Chinese savior. We are going to save you. We're going to do this job. And I think having people like myself or Kiawe or Ni Ming Da, for example, you know, and there was Pandemic Truther. She was wonderful, right? And she was around right from the start. Very good, very informative threads from her. But you don't see these people being invited on. You know, there is an apartheid there.
Yeah, I think you're right. Part of my reason for I've tried not to invite people to my show who have very large followings. Now, occasionally I do invite someone who has a large following. I've been together with Cyrus Jansen and people like that. But I try and keep to what I call the people who have the real life stories.
The fringe.
Well, maybe because we are fringe. I'm growing quite large, but it's kind of surprising. I came on Twitter with the hope that I would one day have more followers than my brother, who to this day still has 860. Someone said, "What are we doing? We're gossiping." Yes, we're just at the moment we're just gossiping.
Well, no, actually, I think this is quite an important thing because
I agree because we're talking about the background to the pro-China narrative being white, male dominated,
and the reason that the anti-China people can say these lies is because we're not humanized, because you don't see Chinese people speaking for ourselves, and it makes us a blank canvas, and it makes it easier to project onto us. And given that Asian women are actually in the firing line more than anybody else, if you think Atlanta, the women who were slaughtered, you know, the women and elderly who were being beaten up in the streets, and now it's spreading more as the right wing are getting emboldened. But the first targets were very much Asian women. So yes, I think it's not gossiping to say, if you cancel me and you render me and people like me invisible, you're actually doing the work of the state. You're doing the work of these people who want to keep us othered, who want to keep us on the margins and not human. Yeah.
Well, you'll be pleased to know that my last live stream 2 days ago had 3 Chinese people on it.
But you're different. Do you know what? I was saying to Steve that there is something about a certain generation of British people where there's this, I don't know what it is, because it seems to be, it's being decapitated now.
Mm-hmm.
But there is this very positive thing, even though you think of the history of Britain, you know, we've gone through the Opium Wars, all the awful things that British imperialism has done. You've also
Yeah.
had a counter thing, you know, this search for truth. It comes out in the arts more, I think, than in the politics. And I was saying to Steve, I wonder if it goes back to like Wat Tyler, all the way back to the Peasants' Revolt. You had the Black Death that wiped out so many peasants, which meant that the peasants suddenly got a sense of themselves and their value. They could charge more. So you've got this whole tradition going through, you know, the English Revolution, Charles I, being offed, and what they would, you know, the mother of all parliaments, for example. So deeply embedded, there is a very positive thing in the British soul. But I think that is in danger of dying out now, and that's why I love people like you and Steve joining arms, you know, helping us all together, because I think ultimately it's the same fight.
Yeah, it's true. There's a lot of, Kevin just said, a lot of American-born, and this is a fact I know for a fact, a lot of American-born Chinese returning to live in China. I had lunch about a month ago with a very good friend of mine, a follower that I've met since I've been online, a follower who contacted me and said, I just bought an apartment in Zhongshan, but in a place called Sanxiang, which is about 20 kilometers from here, but it's still in the same city. And she's bought this apartment. Now, she's come back from the States. She's Hong Kong born. And the other day, she invited me to a lunch with a group of her friends. There were 7 of them. Apart from her, that one lady, all 6 of the rest of them, I mean, they're all wealthy. She included. I mean, really wealthy, super wealthy. All 6 of them held passports from another country. And I'm not talking about BNOs. I'm talking about passports, British passports, Canadian passports, and one American. And every single one of them is in Zhongshan looking to buy an apartment to live here. Now, these people are so rich that one of them is probably, as soon as she left me, they got in a van and went across to Hong Kong. I mean, you can do that now. You can get in a car and go to Hong Kong from here. And they did that. And one of them has almost certainly got her chauffeur-driven Rolls Royce waiting for her at the other end where the van stops. This is serious wealth.
Yeah, and also they could afford a Rolls Royce in a tropical atmosphere where the rust must play havoc with their cars. Yes. No, I think they're so. I don't blame them at all. It's just getting awful. You can't even have a proper discussion. There's no. It's just people lash out with these flashes of what they think is the truth, and when you try and dig deeper and argue, you know, well, where does that come from, and you know how all the contradictions, they just go. Their brains go on the fritz. It's very sad to see this happen.
So we're getting towards our cutoff limit. We said 90 minutes, and we're sitting 7 minutes short of that. I have one question for you now before we finish off and close. Do you think you will ever come back to China?
Oh, I would love to. Isn't there an age cutoff? What's the age cutoff?
You're nowhere near that yet. The retirement age for ladies is 55 if you're thinking about working here. But I believe with a Chinese father, you may be able to get a special visa or special dispensation to live here as a Chinese. You are Chinese.
I feel both. You know, this is what's been interesting, because obviously culturally, I grew up in perhaps the best time. You know, as a kid, I grew up with the Beatles. You know, with all the British theatre, the fashion, just everything, the ideas. It was wonderful. So that is very deep inside me. Hollywood, I love Hollywood movies. You know, that's why I studied movies and do reviews and write myself. Do you know what I'd like? I'd like to. It would be lovely to be in China, just do tours, doing my poetry, like I did with Bookworm in 2015. Oh, that was such a happy experience. I just loved it. Bronchitis at the time, so I'd like to do it again when I can actually give it a bit more welly. But yeah, that would be my ideal life. Actually, I'm not a politician. I was asked at one point if to be trained up as a candidate for the Labour Party, as to be the first British Chinese Labour MP. It's like, thank you for asking me. You know, I'm very flattered that you asked me, but no.
So someone's just asked, how about third or fourth generation Chinese? Can we get the visa? I think, sadly, the answer is no to that. But I mean, the only place to find out for the truth is go to your local embassy or consulate and ask them.
Yeah.
I don't know the true answer, but I'm fairly sure that if your mother or father or both were Chinese born with a Chinese hook or whatever it was back in that day, then I think you can. But honestly, third or fourth generation, probably not. But ask. That's the only thing I can suggest that they do. Ask. Certainly, there's a lot of people trying to come back. Zhuge Liang says he also writes poems. You guys ought to connect to each other if you're not already connected. In English too. Good for you.
Follow me on Twitter. Let's chat.
Yeah. So Zhuge, if you send me an email, my email address is in the bio. I will link you to Anna through Anna. We're only linked on Twitter. We should. Do you do WeChat?
No, I've got WhatsApp. May Wong very kindly, he tried to take me through the process, but we got into this doom loop of security. It was just weird. So he gave up. But Jimmy,
it is a little weird.
Jimmy's also said that he's going to try and do that. He thinks they've cracked down. He thinks this is why that I can't get in, because they're trying to keep, as he said, all the prostitutes out.
You need to have a Chinese person with a Chinese ID identify you. I can't do it.
I've got two people who said that will help me. I've also what was I going to say? Yeah. Oh, by the way, at some point, I want to do more stuff online. I'm getting my kit. I'm trying to get my kit together. The first thing I want to do is I want to have people like Kiaowei and Neiman Da. I'd like to see if Pandemic Truth is up for it, and Rebecca Chan. And I would like, all the Chinese people who are being kept out of this battle by the gatekeepers. That would be a lot of fun. So I hope people will follow me on Twitter and my website and visit my website. And
I'll put them into the. I've got your website here. I think I've got it.
And DMs. I've put some links into our Twitter DMs.
annachen.co.uk. Simple as that.
Yeah.
annachen.co. Let me put that up here so everyone can get that. It's one word, Anna Chen.
Thank you, everyone who tuned in and listened to us having our chat.
Yeah, basically, it was a little more than a gossip session. annachen.co.uk, and it is, honestly, you have a fascinating history, and it goes back such a long way. If somebody wants to spend a month just doing nothing but reading interesting stuff, this is the website for you. It really is.
Can I just say, this is the 30th anniversary of taking Susie Wong to the Edinburgh Festival.
Yeah.
So it's
I should have mentioned that. I had that written down, the 30th anniversary, special anniversary. And yes, this is the human cannonball. I did write cannonball down, sorry. Just looking at that now.
It's annachen.co.uk, all lowercase.
All lowercase. Okay. I think that doesn't matter. You'll still find it if you just tap that in, annachen.co.uk, and go from there and find. And your Twitter as well. What's your Twitter? Tell me that.
Oh, it's now at
Anna Returns, right?
Anna Chen Meow is the actual handle. So
Okay,
it's
so
capital A,
yeah.
it's Anna, capital A, Chen, capital C, Meow,
Oh,
capital
okay. I
M,
think it'll come up with this
I
anyway. It's
A
yeah,
O
yeah, yeah.
W, I A O W.
Oh, sorry, meow.
Yeah.
Correct that.
No,
Let's-
you're doing the Chinese minority.
I've been there. So many places which are meow. I was in Hunan, so Anna Shen
Anna and
Meow.
Chen are C, A and C are uppercase, and Meow is uppercase as well. Do you know, I'd really, every time you talk about, you know, places you visited in China, I would just love to take 3 months off and do that, to do the big tour. What I'd really like is to get on a train to do the British, you know, at one point we had the Belton Road train that went to Barking. Do you remember we spoke about that before?
Yeah,
To get
yeah.
on a train at Barking, go all the way through, you know, the length of the Europe-Asia landmass, go to North China, go all the way down and end up sort of Laos and Vietnam, and then slowly go back and work my way through
Yeah.
Chinese cities.
Well,
That
to
would
get
be
to Laos, you have to use the high-speed train, but the
yeah.
rest of them you could do all the way to Kunming, which is where you get on the high-speed train to Laos. You can still do the old green train, and that's far more interesting. That's like Orient Express stuff, but
Yeah.
not as high quality. And you will be sharing your room with some strange people for sure. There's no doubt about it. I love the old trains. Every time I've got them, I've made friends, really. And in fact, one of the articles I've just written is all about my first trip to Xi'an, and it was a 25-hour train journey. And the lady who I write it for has to translate it because it's a Chinese magazine.
Yeah.
And she
Have you
came
been
back.
to Yan'an? Have you been to Yan'an? You know where the Long March?
No, I've been
finished?
to Sanchi, but not to Yan'an yet.
I went to Yan'an, and that's where the caves are. You know, where Mao and his cohort hung out. And that was so interesting that we needed an interpreter for our interpreter, because again, you know, the dialect is so
interesting. Yeah. You should do the train thing, and when you do, and you're in Guangzhou, then that's when we'll get together. We'll meet there.
I'd love to. Or if you get to the UK.
I think probably I will not come to the UK or go to Australia until the relationship is better. I have a fear that I'll land in the country and they'll say, hey, you know, we want to talk to you. And I may not get out in a hurry, or it may cost me a lot of money to get out and defend myself against telling the truth. I just have
You'd have to stay in the guest room, stay with us.
Yeah, I think, well, actually, we're planning to go to Laos in June on that train. There's 3 of us, at least, maybe 4 of us will go on that train to Laos, because I've never been to Laos. It's one of the few Southeast Asian countries I haven't been to, and I love the train system in China. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So we may slow train to Kunming.
Yeah, videos of that.
I probably will. Yeah, I take a lot of videos which I never ever published. You know, I've got thousands of videos on my phone. I've got action cameras. I've got the real camera behind me here, which you can see it there. I've got a lot of camera equipment, but I just don't use it very well. I'm not very good at this stuff. Got to get better.
Are you on WhatsApp, by the way?
No, we don't use WhatsApp in China.
It's not. So the only way we can communicate is through email.
And through our Twitter accounts, our DMs on Twitter, which are pretty good. The only difference is the time lag. So we've cracked that 90 minutes, and I know that you have a loved one out there waiting for you to come out and enjoy the rest of your, not weekend, it's your day. But thank you very much for your time again. Thank you for the 150 people. We've been up and down, but we've been around the 150 mark for most of the last hour or so. So that's pretty good.
Yeah. So well, I hope to chat to you again, and hopefully everyone look up Shakedown as well, which should be coming out soon when my publisher and I get it together. And it's lovely to talk to you as always, and give my best to Anne.
Will do. And let's not leave it 11 months next time.
No,
Yeah.
quite. So it's
Okay.
not as if there's nothing to talk about.
Well, there's always plenty. And thank you very much, everybody who's out there. So that's time to say good